Good evening, Empire. It's Garrett here with this week's edition of Regions Corner. So this is going to be part 3 in our little leather chest project today. So we've got everything carved, punched, all that good stuff. So now the fun part, dyeing. So we're going to dye the color. Now, there are a lot of options at this point, both in colors and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'm going to just show you how I do it, my personal favorite way to do it, and we're going to give it a kind of, gives it that, I like that aged antique look on my leather. It's pure preference. Now we could easily just take straight black dye and just boom, black it out and be done. But man, that's the easy way out. So with this, first we're going to go ahead and obviously get some gloves on because you don't want to have dye all over your hands. This stuff is alcohol and oil based, and you will, if it dyes leather, it will dye your skin. So unless you want to have dye, now, not permanently, obviously, it will eventually wear off, but, you don't want to go into work the next day, just hands covered in all kinds of colored dye. Now for this, I'm going to be using some Fabrings Saddle Tan Pro Dye. If I remember right, the Pro Dye is an alcohol based. So it dries a little bit faster. It's not there. And the reason I use the Saddle Tan is it's going to dry this kind of light colored tan brown. And the whole point of that is then we're going to use some antique medium brown gel later to give it that final nice antique. So we're going to take a little bit of the Pro Dye and the Saddle Tan. Now another dye I've been working with and I really enjoy is the Angelus leather dye. This is also alcohol based, but this is really great on small projects. I can get some really beautiful colors out of it. Next, we're going to go ahead and using a lambskin piece here. And we're just going to get some little bit of dye on there. And I got a little rag underneath here, just paper towel to catch any excess. And what we want to do, we're just going to work it into the leather, making sure it's all evenly. Now, some people will tell you to use a dauber, paint up to that, and go around it, leave that, and then we'll use some resist on it and antique it, and then we'll and then go back and wipe over it. Me personally, I'm just slap dye on the whole thing, and then once after I've dyed it and antiqued and everything, and it's all dry, before I paint, I'll go back over it with some deglazer and a Q-tip, and I'll just clean up right in the spots I want to paint, which will be along there and there. So that might be part 4, because part 3 is going to be fairly quick, hopefully, because all we're going to do is do this dye job here. And part 4 will be assembly and paint, or paint and assembly, whichever order. So now, at this point, we're going to let this dry for a little while. You see it's already soaking and drying. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. I'm going to flip that over. Now, I already pre-dyed this black on the opposite side off camera so that it would have time to dry. And the reason I did that is because, one, I like, especially with my black pouches, I like to play with contrast of colors. So I want the inside of the box to be black rather than be the whole color throughout. You could easily make the whole thing the same color throughout. It's entirely up to you. It's totally optional. But I want to do this because I want to show you the other step I do that a lot of people don't do or don't know how to do. And what we're going to do is I'm going to get some Tokonol, which is exactly what this is. This is in black. It comes in black, neutral, and brown. So this is what I typically will use on my edges to treat my edges, but we're also going to use this to slick all this rough inside down. So slick it down, make it super smooth and super nice. It's something I love to do. I really like to do when it comes to pouches and bags and stuff like this and pouches, because it just takes it up that extra step in professional and fit and finish. And it's so essentially what we're going to do is I have my little glass piece here, and now I'm using black on black. So if this was a different color, I would not be using black. I'd be using my neutral stuff. It looks white, but trust me, it dries neutral. You won't leave a thing. That being said, this will stain. So if you're trying to do like a black edge on a black brown thing like I like to do, you got and when we go to do the edges, I'll show you that. You got to be really careful with that, or you have to finish the whole front and seal and resist it before you seal the edges. Now with this, we're going to use a bit much. We're going to work it all these cracks. We're going to spread it all out. Now you don't want to go so much that you run off the edge, because we're not trying to dye the edges just yet, which is another reason for the paper towel here, so we can soak anything that goes off to the side before it gets into the front. All right, that should be good enough. Now that we've got that all soaked down, having a rag nearby to wipe everything down, we're going to take our glass slicker here, and as you see, I'm just going to rub this back and forth, much like I'm finishing the edges, except for now I'm sealing and I'm compressing the fibers of the leather down, just like I would if I were to be doing edges of on the edge work. And what this is going to do when it's all said and done, it's going to give you a very smooth, slick inside, which is going to make it look, just like I said, fit and finish, make it look just that much better and that much cooler. And I like to do this on usually like all my belts and pouches and bags and stuff like that. I like to do this with, just to give it that look. Really push in that leather, seal it down, make it nice and slick. I'm not going to worry about these V grooves here too much. They'll get dried. And let that sit for a minute. And then we're going to go ahead and wipe it all down. Get any excess off. We don't want that bunching up or squirting out anywhere, so we're just going to and as you see here, we got a very nice, slick, smooth area. Then if we did our job right, okay, just a little bit there. I'm not too worried about that mark there. That's going to get hidden. That'll get hidden. So now we're going to flip it back over. Now this is still just a little bit wet, but I think we can get away with doing what we're going to do next. So as you can see, that's a very light brown. Obviously not the color we're going for, and definitely not that nice antique brown I like in my pieces. So Now we're going to counteract that. Now we're going to use the antique gel. I prefer gel over paste. It's much smoother. Spreads easier. I think it penetrates better. Can be a little bit messier, certainly, than paste. There are people that swear by the paste. And let me swap my gloves because I don't want the black. I don't want that black to leave fingerprints and finger marks all over the place. So that's the one thing is, you don't be afraid to change gloves out in between dyeing, painting, and antiquing, because the antique's going to get messy. Now I'm using a medium brown. And what we're going to do is we're just going to drip, 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 drip. And that's probably plenty enough. Once again, I'm going to use another sheepskin here. Very useful. And we're just going to, now in the artwork here, we really, really want to put a little pressure in there. Get into all these cracks and all these crevices that we created. And we're just going to work that all leather in. Now this one, because we're not worried too much about the edges on this, because we're doing that contrast, I like to make sure I get the edges too, so that later when I go to do the edge work, because we already did black on Tokonole, we're not worried about the brown overdoing the black. If I was doing this all in one solid color, then yeah, we'd just go ahead and just do the whole thing in a solid color. No problem. Alrighty. Now, how long do we leave the antique on? That is always the magical question. Technically speaking, the longer you leave it on, usually the darker it will get. But I don't like to leave it on so long that it dries. Because if you let it get dry to the point that it dries, it becomes very thick and pasty and very hard to get off. And it doesn't always come off right. So usually by the time I've already done the project, I've already worked everything in. Give it a minute to settle in and stain. Then we go through with a nice clean cloth, and I'm going to wipe and buff as much of that off as I can. So I think that's looking pretty good. Now, antique will bring out any imperfections in the leather. That's just what it does. It makes it look aged. And now I'm doing the entire piece. You could even dye the entire piece with antique. I used to do that a lot when I first started. Or I could have done the whole thing, say, in medium brown and only antiqued my artwork here. Because the antique is designed to get into all these crevices and all these cracks and kind of make it pop more. Now that we've antiqued it, this is usually where I have to let it dry overnight for about 7 or 8 hours. Make sure it's all nice and dry and smooth and like that. So we got this really nice antique brown. I think that's pretty good. I like the design there. So what we'll go ahead and do on here, now that we got it all designed up, let's talk hardware. So for this, we're going to use a 2-piece clasp. I'm going to use this oversized piece here. It's really pretty. Oh, come on. Typically has, as you see, 2 pieces. This is way too big for this project, so we're not going to use that. But let's just give you an idea. So we got a couple options here. Now, typically, because it's an antique brown in there, I generally like to use either a contrast to it or a nice antique there. That looks pretty nice because that goes on the bottom. Your top piece will go on the top. That's so as it folds over, it'll fold onto that. This is why I only put 1 hole in it, because this way I can put the hole and I can match it up. I can get there and I can go ahead and mark where my other hole is going to go. And vice versa. Do the same thing for down here. Make sure it's all lined up. Then I can punch my holes. Now, we can do an antique. I might just do this new one I got. This really pretty black. You know, I might do the black one on this one. I like the black and brown contrast. I may even paint this. I'll have to think about this. I might paint this brown. I mean, not brown. It's already brown. Black and black, or copper and copper. I really like the Angelus metallic copper paint. Really nice colors. Really good leather paint. Now, another paint I like to use also for bigger projects is the EcoFlow Cova color. Also makes for some great color. Now, with the gold, if I didn't have copper, I would paint this gold and then antique it, and it comes out a very nice copper gold look. So something to keep in mind if you don't necessarily have there. And of course, I don't. And there's also the nickel. But I'm thinking it's probably going to be the antique, just because I like the antique. Nickel, no, that's not bad either. That might, actually, I think I might go with the, what is this? They call this the, it's a swing bag clasp, small. Get them from Tandy Leather. They're about $3 a piece. And I obviously buy a bunch. I go through several on these projects. So I think I'm going to go with that, with probably some copper and copper, just because that's just what I like. The black wouldn't be bad. So let's go ahead and punch these holes. Now, that being said, I'm not going to install the... That's a little small. Let me get... I'm not going to install this today, because I want this all to dry first. Just marking and punching that hole now. So that is part 3 with that. Now, you gotta get this time to dry. And then what we'll probably do tomorrow, when I talked about resist, Resinline works very well. There's other things, Pro Resist, satin sheen. There's all kinds of things. Basically, what it does is it's going to be a resist. So let's say I would paint around on this artwork here, and that would resist taking the dye and the paint. Now, because I'm kind of lazy like that, I went ahead and did the whole thing. I don't have any. Next thing we're going to use is deglazer with a Q-tip. And then we're going to use either deglazer, if you don't want to spend this, or you want something a little bit less fumey. This stuff is very, very strong. I would not recommend doing this like indoors or somewhere without a lot of good ventilation, okay? This is very strong stuff, very vaporous, and it will smell up your house real fast. You can also use denatured alcohol, which is a lot less potent as far as the smell goes, a lot less stronger. And then I would just take a Q-tip. We're going to clean that up before I go to paint it. And then we'll clear coat the whole thing, and then we'll make the final installation. I like to always just kind of work the piece. And that, my friends, is part 3. And that is basically how I do it. Now, for the artwork here, we're probably going to leave that alone. I'm probably not going to paint that. I'm just going to paint here and this. Or you could just about... Yeah, I'll definitely paint that. But sometimes you can leave it just like that. That looks really nice, in my opinion. I think that looks really cool. I like that dark... This is just what I like. I like the antique stuff. What can I say? I could have just as easily I've done them in solid black. You could do them in blue. You can, there's all kinds of colors, solid colors you can do. And if you're new to dyeing and you're worried about mixing up and this and that, go with black. You can't go wrong with black. Because usually it's only going to get so dark. And so I showed you how to do my slick edge there, so you can just see, I hope you see or feel, just tell just how smooth that is. It's really nice, and I think it's a nice touch. And this is the part that kind of sucks about leatherwork. You got to have some patience. You got to let this dry. I could probably rush it a little, but if you try to use the Resin right off the bat, especially with this antique and it hasn't dried very well, it will smudge and smear and pull you'll totally ruin the paint job if you're not careful. So that's why you got to give it time to dry. So we're going to go ahead and give it time to dry. Now this end, because it's still smooth and wet, I'm going to go ahead and take my edger here. And I'm going to go ahead and seal up and finish these edges. This is why you use the edge beveler, is to make this job easier. You could do it without an edge beveler, but it's going to be a lot harder and it's not going to look as good. That helps round the edges here so that everything looks nice and smooth. And we also finish these edges so that this helps with wear and tear of just using the item. Now these are little chests. They're marketed as dice chests, but I mean, they're a chest. You can put anything in them. They're like a leather box. I've put dice in them. You hold all kinds of lovely stuff. And they're really cool, fun projects to make. I've made these for like Mother's Day and all kinds of other deals and give them away. And they're great little token presents to make for people. And you can get pretty creative with them. I mean, there's lots of room for them. And like I said, the person that made these patterns, I gave him credit in the first video. I'll have to look up the name, but I know he has several other ones, including a mimic and a dragon, and I'm kind of really wanting to try the mimic one. But so we're just gonna smooth and round these edges while we got it, since everything's already all covered in the dye and the Toccoline. Now the Toccoline stuff isn't the cheapest stuff in the world, I'll give you that, but it is so worth every penny. So buying a small thing of it for $8 or $10, I think is absolutely worth it. There are certain things you just got to spend the money on, and that is definitely one of them. It'll make your life so much easier. And with that, I think that's about all we can do for this video. I'm going to let this dry, and then I guess in part 4, we'll go ahead and we'll attach hardware. We will, well, I got to paint it, maybe clear coat it. Clear coating is really option. That just protects the leather even further. This being a dice chest, I don't think it's necessary. If I was doing a piece of armor or something that would be exposed to the weather, or a pouch or bags, absolutely. So we'll probably go ahead and do our paint, add the hardware, and assemble it all in part 4. So until the next time, stay crafty.